and we just saw Superman, the new Superman movie, so we are here to talk a little bit about it. Brett, I am going to start with you.
Yeah.
Because you are writing our official review of Superman.
The rest of us are just tagging.
We're just tagging along.
That's right. Riding my coattail. My cape, as it were.
Your cape, exactly. You don't tug on Superman's cape.
You don't.
But tell us what you thought about Superman.
I feel like the perfect Superman movie is still out there somewhere.
Okay.
I didn't feel like this
Isn't
was
he
it.
so polite?
Yeah.
Isn't he so nice?
I thought this movie was just okay.
Just okay.
I really did.
Okay.
There were some things that I liked and some things that I thought didn't work.
So you just thought it was just okay.
I thought the movie was just okay.
So let me ask you, because you have actually reviewed the original Superman.
Yeah.
So, and I'm sure you've seen Man of Steel and the
Yes.
whole bit. So how would it rank in those sort of first generation Superman?
Well, I tell you what I'll do instead is, so I reviewed Superman the movie from 1978 recently, right? And the way I felt about this new Superman movie, I feel very similar to the one from 1978.
Oh, that's interesting.
There were parts of that one too that I really liked, but parts that didn't work for me.
Yeah.
The things that worked were Superman's character.
Okay.
Right? And I would say that was a big positive of this new movie too. I thought they really nailed the character of Superman.
Okay, now
Which
the
is
question,
super important.
The question
It is
though,
important.
Are you talking about the character as in the scripted individual person, or the character as in the quality of his character?
I would say both.
Really?
Yeah, I would lean into both. I thought that the Superman played by David Corenswet, this new Superman, was heroic. He was self-sacrificial. He was trying to do the right thing.
Yes.
I thought in maybe a little bit, added a little more depth than maybe we saw in the original, like the Christopher Reeve performance, just in terms of they tried to give him some flaws. But I think the flaws they gave him were very human flaws.
Yes.
He doubts himself, right? There are these elements where he gets frustrated because he is trying to do the right thing and it seems like things are working against him. But it was very relatable in that way. So I felt that worked.
Yeah. So Mr. Hoos,
Yeah.
I take it that you have a
sounds
different
like you
take
disagree.
Well,
on
you
the
know,
character.
the fact is, watching movies and evaluating them is very subjective. It really is. And I just thought it was terrible.
So okay, but let's
okay,
stick with first off the character of Superman. So
Okay, character of Superman. Basically, the thing I really disliked about it wasn't that I disliked
The actor.
Corenswet in the role, because he looked the part. He did. But I understood totally why James Gunn couldn't have Henry Cavill in there, because they had set up Henry Cavill's character as something completely different. It's a completely different guy. The Superman that we see in this movie is, okay, let's put it this way. James, the point of this movie was not to tell Superman's story. The point of this movie was to establish the new DC universe.
That was one thing that didn't work. That was one thing that didn't work for me either.
And that's why the script, to me, just didn't work. Because why? I wanted to be there to see Superman. I wanted to learn about this new Superman. I wanted to see how he interacted with Lois and the other people in his world. And what I saw was this massive universe overfilled with people and characters, to set up this new world.
So let me riff on that just for a minute, because I know one of the worries that you had going into this movie, and I think you expressed this as well, there were a lot of villains in this.
Oh, a lot.
Now, I personally think that they incorporated them pretty well, but I would guess that you two disagree.
Well, see, I think personally, and I'm going to jump right in here,
for
because
it.
this was one of the areas that really bugged me. I thought I was more concerned not about the new characters that they added, because we didn't know anything about them anyway, but about the characters that they put in there, the way they changed them. They didn't refer to the source material, and I
Jimmy
don't think,
Olsen, would you be saying?
Jimmy Olsen was just okay as far as I was concerned.
Yeah.
And I thought the Lois Lane was great. I
Spot
thought
on.
Rachel Brosnan, she was excellent. In fact, probably my favorite Lois Lane in all of the movies. Personally, I just liked her character. But they didn't have enough for her to do, because there was so many other people there and so much other stuff.
The movie was overstuffed.
Yes.
100%. And it wasn't just the villains, frankly. It was every character.
Yeah.
Even the Daily Planet has too many characters, right? You have Lois Lane,
There were
you
a
have
lot.
Jimmy Olsen, but then you have like 5 other characters in there that are like featured throughout the movie, and it's like, I just didn't care about some of those additional characters, and I felt like it crowded out the good stuff that was done with Superman's character.
And what they did with those characters, it just wasn't very good. Okay, they had some extra side characters like Metamorpho, all right? And this is like, he's this OP super who in the comics, he could do anything because he can use all the elements of the periodic table.
Right. He can transform himself into any sort of mineral.
He's incredibly powerful. And in this film, they sort of play him as this sort of nebbish, weak character, and I didn't like him at all. And Ma and Pa Kent, all right?
They did not sound like they came from Kansas.
Not at all. They, they had this sort of hillbilly accent, like Ma says, "Well, Pa is always so squishy when it comes to Clark," and then Paul says, "Well, I was over at the Bucky and the burritos was good," and it was like, what? This is Mon Pa Kent. This is Mon Pa Kettle, which you probably don't even remember Mon Pa Kettle, but I mean, it just they didn't fit, and I thought, why?
Which is a huge problem. Because the best thing in this movie, I think, besides, I like the character of Superman, but for me, it was his conflict between his Kryptonian heritage and his human heritage.
Yes.
Right? And when they leaned into that and trying to balance that and have Superman kind of measure out, okay, what do I take from this? What do I take from this? It just got crowded out by everything else.
So it's interesting that you say that, because I really didn't feel that sense of crowding. I felt like that tension between, and we won't spoil anything here, but that tension between his Kryptonian heritage and
Which they do something a little different with
They
that.
do something a little bit different, but I found that, and granted, I don't think they explored it as much as I would have wanted. But when they did explore it, they explored it super well. I thought they really dug into that sense of goodness, like coming from a plugged-in perspective, focus on the family. It had some great messages about adoption and how you are raised makes a huge difference in who you become. And I liked how they focused in on that.
But it was such a side theme. It really was.
See, I didn't find it a side theme.
Well, I mean, you can look at it and say, ooh, I want that to be the focus, but it's not the focus. The focus is all these other people crowding in, and the unbalance between what Luthor could accomplish and what Superman could accomplish. I mean, essentially, this movie drops us in 3 years after Superman has sort of made his debut.
Yeah, Superman year
so
3.
He's been around for 3 years, okay? So he's been doing a lot of heroic things that we don't know about because we've never seen them. But in that 3 years, we get to Superman, and he's still sort of glumphing around, and he doesn't even know how to use his full powers, whereas Luthor has gotten to the point where
I totally reject that argument, by the way.
He despises this man. And not only has he grown to despise Superman, but he's set up this technological empire and broken through multi-dimensions to create all these these devices that literally for the first 90 minutes of the movie, Superman is getting his backside kicked up and down and around
Which
Kansas.
is a great way to start the movie.
Well,
yeah, I think
really
that's a
didn't.
really nice way to start the movie because it is something that you have never seen in a Superman movie.
Oh, come on. I have seen Superman
but not at the very
lose.
beginning.
Well, not for 2/3 of the movie. I don't want to see him get kicked around for 2/3 of the movie.
I loved how they started it out.
I want to see Superman, who has been doing his thing for 3 years. Surely, not only does he know his skills, or he should know his skills.
He knows his skills.
He should have his
What are you
He's
talking
had
about?
skill sets since puberty, and yet he gets in there and he just can't seem to figure out how to beat anybody.
No, the thing is, he has been studied. This is getting way off track. But
No, it's not off track.
I love the fact
It shows the flaws of this movie. So go ahead.
I loved how Lex Luthor, he knew his moves. He had never lost. It even says in in the movie that he had never lost a fight before.
Yes.
It had been sort of like Lex Luthor treats it as a chess match.
Yes.
And what we see him in the beginning is that he has seen all of Superman's moves, which are 2,500 of them. He knows how to anticipate them, and because of that, his technological
he's got
skill.
a counter move for each one. I understand.
Now,
I understand. But here's the thing. Here's the thing. If Superman were faced with this kind of opposition,
Right.
Okay, if he goes in there and he gets beaten down, and he
in your estimation of Superman,
yes, well, in Superman, based on everything that everybody's ever written about Superman,
all right,
but
we'll
if he
go
gets-
back to that.
If he gets
we'll go back to
beaten
that.
down and he pulls himself up and he hits his sunshine and gets healed up and goes back into battle, he's not going to do the exact same things again when he sees that his opponent knows his every move.
So now
That's what Superman does.
I love how Bob pulled out, like, do you even read the source material?
Now, let's go back to the source material, because when you're talking about, and again, this is a little off a plugged-in topic, but when we're talking about Lex Luthor, when you look at his original appearance in the comics, the main reason why he became Superman's most nefarious enemy
Right.
is because Superman made him bald.
Yeah, because
So
of an
let's
accident in their
be
youth. Yes.
honest here. When you're talking about the character of Lex Luthor in the movie, the idea, and this has a nice spiritual component to it too, where you're talking about Lex Luthor wants to say, okay, there's this alien amongst us who everybody seems enamored with, and you make us humans look all weak and helpless, right? Now, there's always
what he says.
and he admits that he's also incredibly jealous, right?
Yeah, and he's also very
envious.
power hungry.
He is very power hungry, so all that is true. But when you're talking about sort of that link to, man, humanity just looks all weak and helpless. One of the purposes of Superman, I think, in the comics has always been to show humanity at its best. Like, it's wanted to give humanity a symbol to hold on to. And we've talked, I think, on our podcast and blogs about how Superman can be seen as sort of this messianic type of figure. And so when you look at that sort of humanistic angle that Lex Luthor has,
Yes.
I like it from a Christian angle, because that's sort of what we tend to think of in today, where we say we can save ourselves. And in Christianity, we say, no, we need a savior.
But all of that symbolism, as far as what Superman represents, is not in this film.
It totally is.
No, because from the moment we see him, he is being beaten into the dirt. Now, how can that be a symbolism of the best of humanity when he loses at every turn?
Well, so having a more vulnerable Superman, right? I didn't mind it. In fact, I actually kind of was drawn to it because it makes what he does more heroic. When he's putting his body in front of another human being, right? He is...
Well, and a squirrel.
And a squirrel, right?
That squirrel scene was like, what?
He saves
People are
a lot of
dying everywhere.
animals.
He saves that
too.
squirrel. Like, what?
It was just a funny moment.
It's
Go
just
ahead.
a funny moment.
Go ahead.
And I would say, speaking to that, this movie definitely was sillier and campier than I expected. Than really any superhero movie I think I've seen in a while.
It leaned into that
intentionally.
50s, 60s type of
It
vibe.
intentionally leaned into that. But yeah, Superman being vulnerable, I think, added more heroism to when he would put his life on the line.
I would agree with that. And let's talk a little bit about sort of that silly aspect, because that was something I wasn't sure whether I was going to embrace. As the movie went on, I kind of dug it. Right, it was silly. You've got Crypto with the cape. You've got the dog with the cape,
who features pretty heavily into the movie.
Yeah,
that's not
yeah.
that's not like a one.
But
No,
that's what I'm saying, though.
but now
A movie where Superman is being beaten into the ground and the only hero is the dog. Give me a
well,
break.
the dog is no,
He's
the
still a
dog is
hero.
not.
Yeah, but the dog is the only one who gets revenge. By I don't want to
Oh,
give
my-
too much away, but still. So I mean, the fact is that Superman is kicked and pummeled and shoved and ground into the dirt all the way through this entire film.
Let me just echo what Brett says. I think that more vulnerable Superman is a good thing, because when you see him in his power it makes it all the more powerful. And it makes his heroism all the more heroic because you know that there are literal, real stakes involved. And I think that that's one of
When
the
you
things
see him
that.
in his power, let's see, there was, what, 2.5
Oh
minutes?
my goodness. Okay, so I know that we're probably.
So the campiness of it. I just
Yeah.
So for me, the campiness was, and I think many people's mileage will vary on this, but for me, it was both charming at times and very cognitively dissonant at times as well, right? Where it was like, okay, this fits maybe with this character or what's going on here.
It felt very Guardians of the Galaxy
The aesthetic, well,
At times.
there's something to be said about. So James Gunn, I think, is a good filmmaker, and man, he knows how to use music to really like emphasize a scene or a point. I felt like some of those musical elements were used more in a manipulative way in this movie, where it was like just to make you feel good walking out of the theater, kind of a thing. Where I was like, I don't know if I really liked as much of the movie as I thought coming out of like the very end, because it ends on a
Also,
fun
on the campy side of things, the fact is that I think James Gunn used some of that to update some of these characters. I mentioned before that I didn't like how he handled some of the characters.
Yeah, and I didn't either, by the way.
I'm going to mention a character that has, just a real quick cameo, and it's okay. It doesn't spoil too much. But Supergirl sort of steps in just very, very briefly. And to sort of update her character for the younger audience, Gunn makes her kind of crass, and Superman himself even mentions that, she's a party girl and she goes and parties on planets with red suns so she can get drunk. And
it's such a throwaway.
I disliked that. I disliked manipulating these characters that we know so well, just to either get a giggle or to sort of update them for the current youth.
No, I would agree with that, actually. I think that's what they did with some of the characters felt unfair.
Yeah.
For fans of those characters, I like Green Lantern. I didn't like what they did with Green Lantern in this. I think that there were some attempts to make it feel lighter and sillier and crasser than it really needed to be.
Definitely.
And while we're on the topic of being crass, I think that this is a good time to maybe bring up, so as parents who are sort of considering, okay, so I want to take my kid to this movie, should I? What sort of problems do we need to worry about here?
Yeah, I think you mentioned just some of the language can get pretty harsh, and surprisingly so in certain times, right?
Actually, more than you might expect.
Yes, I would agree with that.
Yeah, more than you might expect. I think that there are suggestive moments, some dialogue, and some moments throughout the film as well. I wouldn't say any more than the 1978 Superman, the movie, actually.
That's probably fair.
But I would say it was more, in that movie, it was more specific to a scene or two. And in this one, it's more like sprinkled throughout the film as well.
Yeah, fortunately, he didn't put some of that language in Superman's mouth.
Yeah.
Superman kept it clean.
Sort of.
For the most part.
Sort of.
Well,
he was quoting certain
but he
people.
repeated something that somebody
Correct.
else had said.
Correct.
Yeah. I think, again, feeding into Superman's character, they really played that well without being like, oh, look at this dork kind of a thing. It was done in a charming way, too. It's Superman's kind of, but
He even said, "Oh golly."
yeah.
He did say, "Oh golly," I really
Oh,
did
golly.
appreciate that.
And then of course you have the expected like comic book action violence that you're going to expect, the smash ups and punch ups and things like that. Maybe a little more blood at times than you expect. I mean, when we first see Superman, to Bob's point, he's pretty beaten up, right? And he's bleeding and bruised and everything like that. So there's a little bit of that, but
And
the expected action violence.
There is one flat out murder that was pretty jarring.
That was,
that was a difficult scene to watch. So you do lean into some harsher elements, but for those who are used to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, I don't think that there would be anything beyond what we would typically see there.
Except that this is a Superman movie. And there is a
That's a
certain
fair point.
standard, I think, that we hold a Superman movie to.
I think that's fair. One of the things that I really did like about the character Superman is that he did feel kind of that symbol of purity, that symbol of justice. And I was coming into work this morning, I was thinking of the contrast between he and Batman in The Dark Knight, where The Dark Knight truly lives in this world and he uses the tools of this world to accomplish his good. Superman literally comes from outside this world, and you feel his goodness. One of the lines that stuck with me was he was talking with Lois about how when he was a kid he used to really like punk rock music, even though it wasn't really punk rock.
It was more pop.
And then it goes, and then Lois says, you know, you like everyone that you've seen. You look at everyone and you think that they're beautiful. And he says, maybe that's the real punk rock. And that's one of the things I actually really liked about this character is that he embraced the goodness wholeheartedly in a way that we haven't seen as much in some of the newer translations of Superman.
And critically, the movie itself did it in, I think, a very sincere and earnest way, right? They held him up as like, hey, yes, this guy is a paragon in this way, right? Not, well, oh, this character feels this way, but the movie's going to be super sarcastic about it. And like, well, you know,
I would agree, but I would say all of that is established at the end of the film.
Which is where you want it to be.
But here's the thing. That's where I wanted. That's where I wanted the film to start. I wanted him to be the person he was at the end of the film, at the beginning of the film.
Now, I would say,
and I'm not talking about facing challenges, because that's part of drama, is to face challenges. But I liked him at the end of the film. At the beginning of the film, I didn't like him all that much. In fact, he was this hot-headed guy who was sort of yelling at Lois when she asked him a pointed question. And in fact,
which I actually liked.
Here's the thing. I would have liked to have seen he and Lois have some more interaction, because I liked the two characters, and I liked what they were doing. There just wasn't enough room for them to be together.
And yeah, I would say that as well. More interaction between him and Lois, developing that. More interaction for Ma and Pa Kent, right? Because as they play a critical part in the story, it felt...
As Ma and Pa from Kansas rather than Ma and Pa from
Krypton.
The back hills.
Oh,
I'm talking about that. I mean, the fact is that they went so far with that. It was like, have you ever met anyone in Kansas that spoke like that?
Some people have some... I thought the accent
comes from Kansas, just so you know.
I thought the accent was a bit much. They were laying on
bit much?
pretty thick. Pretty thick. Again, maybe that was just a decision of leaning into the campiness of it as well. We're going to make them very...
That have never been to Kansas.
Very country,
said,
right?
Well, we got to have somebody sound like that.
Right. But it just felt overstuffed in the way of like, I could have used more Superman and Lois, Ma and Pa Kent, right?
Yeah.
These connections that really mattered, especially as the theme was, hey, Superman, you know, if you're comparing Superman and Lex Luthor, Superman has more humanity than Lex Luthor, even though he's not from this world, right?
Absolutely.
And leaning into that more, I think, would have benefited the movie more. And it would have hit stronger, especially when I walked out of the theater, because I kind of felt like you, Bob, in the sense that I felt like so much heavy lifting was done at the very end of the movie in terms of like, well, this is what it was about.
Right.
Yeah.
All along. And it was like, well, it would have been nice to have that seeded throughout the whole movie.
It would have been nice to start there and then write a nice script.
So we will let that be. I have so many things to say, but we are going to leave it right there and let you have the last word, Mr. Hoos.
Well, thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us for this video. This has been a lot of fun. Clearly, we could talk for another 3 hours on this subject, and I could tell these guys where they are wrong, but that will have to wait. So in the meantime, be sure to like, comment, share, subscribe, do all the things that you do on YouTube, and be sure to check out our channel for more content like this. We'll be talking about a lot more movies in the future.